chocolate cake if anybody wants chocolate cake for live.
Oh, I'd love to.
Okay. This is Senate Appropriations. We continue our work on the budget adjustment. It's in January 30th. And our first item on the agenda is to walk through the language as it relates to the language that we have on the Vermont Strong license plates. This was a topic of discussion and a letter that went out because the issuance of the license plate established a fee and also appropriated money. And so from the legislative perspective, under the Constitution, raising revenues and setting fees and appropriating money and directing where it goes is actually the authority of the legislative branch. So it was in response to that situation that we felt that it was really important that the legislature state its position regarding the license plates, the fee, and ultimately the distribution of any revenue. So with that background, and I'm sure all of you remember the letter that was sent by the leadership to the governor outlining those constitutional issues. So in this case, it just happened to be license plates, but the constitutional issues, in fact, could have been for a variety of reasons. So we have with us Anthea Dexter Cooper, who is with Ledge Council, and Chris Roop, who's with Joint Fiscal, to go through that section of the budget adjustment as it was passed out of the House. And we can look at section 96. And I guess, did we pass out that list? Yes, we did. So it would be in here too. Way to the back.
So, Director Anthea Dexter Cooper.
I just want to make sure people have got the document that Grady gave. Or you, if you want, you can actually look at the bill.
Section 96.
Is it the name of the bill? Section 96.
So it's sections 96 and 97, and if you are in the bill, it should be starting on page 84.
In this 3-page document, is it the same language?
So the 3-page document is what the law currently looks like. So the Vermont Strong license plate, the authorization to issue the I am Vermont Strong license plate, stems back to a bill that was passed in
Starts on page 90 of the annotated.
The 3-page document is just existing.
The 3-page document is existing section law. So it was enacted in 2012, very early on in February of 2012 in response to the flooding from Tropical Storm Irene, which was in the August of 2011. And then it has been amended several times since then. The most significant of those amendments was to allow it to be displayed indefinitely. The commemorative license plates prior to the I am Vermont Strong commemorative license plate were only allowed to be displayed for a limited number of years. So I provided that document to you so you could see like what the lay of the land was prior to the governor's executive order, which was Executive Order 0423. Which was signed in August of 2023. The key things to know when you're looking at, and Senator Kitchell, you did a beautiful job explaining the reason why this is an issue more than just license plates.
And it isn't the amount of money involved here, which in the scheme of things is relatively modest. It's been over $1 million. But what happened was, for example, the money under the order got redirected. We had directed the Irene money to the food bank. That the governor decided not to direct any and to direct it to the Vermont Community Foundation. So that's just the backdrop. And so it's not necessarily that this is millions and millions of dollars, but it has to get into really asserting what is our constitutional responsibility and authority. So take it away.
So the key things, sorry. So the key things from the legislation that existed prior to that executive order, no one is saying that there couldn't have been a revamping of the Vermont Strong license plate yes, there is language, and you'll see this as section 1. You'll also see it being struck out in section 96 of the DAA. It does link to a response to Tropical Storm Irene. That was the backdrop of the original iteration. But there was nothing that was prohibiting the governor through the DMV from having another Vermont Storm license plate like they did, where you were getting into issues in terms of the choices that were made in the executive order to sort of update the session law was in where the money went, the price of the license plate. So what you have in section 96, and if you go all the way to the end of the bill, you'll see that section 96 takes effect retroactively to August 23rd of 2023. That's the date of the executive order. Section 96 is taking session law and aligning it to the executive order. I think this branch would have preferred it if it had been done in the reverse order, where there was session law and then there's the implementation of the revamped license plate. But this is making what was done in August of 2023 and the session law that allows for these license plates to align. And the key changes are the price goes from $25 to $35. There's the authorization for bundled transactions. That's where you're getting your darn tough VR Tough 2 socks. And where the revenue goes, both the revenue from the sale of the license plates at the $35 amount and the revenue that is generated from the sale of any promotional items that are bundled. There are also then a number of updates. We draft differently, we capitalize more things now. There are some parts of the session law that are very outdated at this point. Like it talks about how Vermont Life magazine can sell the license
Oh, that's
plate.
perhaps,
Don't talk about that.
no, Sarah Busman and I have battle scars on that one.
Bad ones.
Yeah.
So that's section 96. I can go back and do more of a line by line, but I want to tell you about section 97 because section 97 will take effect on passage and then it makes some changes. So if we're looking at our timeline from August of 2023 until whenever the BAA is enacted, you have the existence of this second Vermont Strong license plate that was done inconsistent with session law. BAA takes effect, retroactively makes session law align with the executive order. And then from passage forward, there's a different iteration of session law that would be applicable for the license plates. And the key changes there are no more bundled transactions. And instead of the revenue from the sale of the license plates going $5 to the DMV and then the $30 being split between the, I'm gonna get the name wrong because I just want to call it BGAP. The 50% going to the ACCD's Business Emergency Gap Assistance Program and the other $15 to the Vermont Community Foundation. The entire $30 will go to the general fund for natural disaster relief recovery. So instead of it going to two identified sources up front, it would go to the general fund. This does, I think, create a situation where if next year, 5 years from now, some amount of time in the future, there is another natural disaster and there is a desire by the administration at that time to have another iteration of the Vermont Strong license plate, maybe that we really still are tough and strong now again, that could be done, but the money would be going to the general fund for you, the appropriators, to figure out how the money is divvied up for natural disaster recovery. So I'm just gonna do that one more time. From August of 2023 until passage done inconsistent with session law, passage retroactively back to August of 2023, session law is made to align the executive order, and then for passage forward, no bundled transactions, and there would be all the money less the amount that goes to the DMV for the plates to the general fund. In terms of bundled transactions, that is bundled transactions by the administration. So the administration would be out of the business of, for example, having on the DMV's website saying you can buy socks and license plates at once.
Or maple syrup, or any other product, or any other promotional item, which was a topic of also concern around the, you know, just the advertising benefit that comes with this, so. That's important for time. to understand, we're sort of doing what we did with the sale of the property, of the purchase of the property at the Franklin Airport, which required JTOC or approval for the purchase. And so it was another retroactive, but an assertion of legislative. I feel like Queen Elizabeth I, who was always talking about her, prerogative. But this is more than prerogative. This is constitutional.
But just to finish the thought on the bundle transactions, it wouldn't stop. The example I've been doing is company that makes really tough gloves. It wouldn't stop tough glove company from having a display and selling the license plate if the commissioner authorizes them to sell the license plate, which the session law is always allowed. And next to it, tough gloves, and they could then choose to have the revenue from the sale of those tough gloves go back to the state. It's getting the state out of the business of selling the bundled item, not the other company out of the business of selling the license plate with their maple syrup as an example of an item that they could.
Sweet love. Okay, Senator Burke.
Well, let's take that example. So does it, the way I read it, it seems like it has to say Vermont strong on it. So if you wanted to have sweet love license plate, you could not, the DMV is not authorized to do that. But if they wanted to do a, Vermont tricentennial license plate commemorative, they could not do that without.
I do not think they could. All of the commemorative license plates have been done either in session law, like this license plate, or they actually used to be in codified law, which was a really sort of interesting choice because they've always been a limited item. So it was like the bicentennial to be displayed for 2 years. I do want to talk about the display for just a second because there are lots of questions about that. So under the session law from 2012 and no changes here, you're required to put the license plate, the Vermont Strong license plate on top of your front license plate. That other plate needs to be behind it. I think that is probably a carryover from when these were intended to be like a 2-year thing. You wouldn't want someone 2 years later taking off their commemorative license plate and then scratching their head and wondering like, where did my license plate go? But it always comes up when you talk about the Vermont Strong license plate. Do we need a front license plate? This does not change the front license plates. It's an exception for cars. You're required to still have that other license plate behind it. Nothing in section 96 changes that, nothing in section 97 changes that.
Because that would get into transportation jurisdiction.
Yeah,
We certainly don't want to intrude.
no,
No.
and we talked a lot about front license.
Yeah. We even tried to get rid of it. But
We
unsuccessful.
do have a member that doesn't like.
So, questions of Anthea. I mean, if people want, I guess we could give a copy if you'd like. If you, we're asking you to search your memory bank of the letter that went out from leadership around, this whole issue and the constitutional issues. But that's really what we're dealing with. So if you want a copy of the letter, just as a reference, we can make that available. I don't think anybody wants to.
Immediately us.
We didn't leak it.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
No, it was, so, that's, and this has been a topic of discussion for a number of months, and this was what we felt was the best way to really get us to the point where we were, carrying out what we feel very strongly about is our constitutional responsibility.
We feel Vermont strongly about it.
Could you state that for the record?
I just can't wait for you to say that.
Right up there with those plane coordinates.
Right.
Well, I keep you resilient. Questions of Anthea on this? Okay.
I'll stick around if there are any questions after.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Christopher Joint Fiscal. I have just very little to add to Anthea's excellent summary of the issue, but I did just want to let the members know that posted on the website under my name on today's date, and some of you may have in hand a copy of the financial report that was summarizes how much has been brought in from these plates and bundled promotions through the beginning of this month. So if the committee wants, I can get a more updated version from DMV, but I think quite honestly, this this gives you a good sense of context as to how many units have been sold and how much money has been generated. Through January 4th, just over $1 million was generated through both the plates, the bundled promotions, and people making donations, which you can do on the website without having to sort of buy anything. As of January 4th, $423,000 went to each, the Community Foundation and the ACCD Business Emergency Gap Assistance Program. And about $126,000 was brought in through donations. The donations go to the Emergency Donation Special Fund, whereas the other proceeds go to, the net proceeds, net of costs, is separated 50% between ECF and that ACCD program. So we're not, as Senator Kitchell noted, we're not talking many millions of dollars here.
Actually, by the time we got rid of the production costs and reimbursement for the stocks, we're under. And we'll subtract $160,000 from
Right.
1.1,
Right,
so we're not even $1 million.
right, it's
It's the principle.
correct.
Senator Birchwood, what else have you got?
I just wondered if you had looked at either before or in this, what the late sales were back in the original place, like.
So I've seen some reports from back then and they were relatively in line with this. I think they sold, they raised about $1 million from that, give or take, 100 or 200,000. I don't know if I've ever seen a final firm accounting.
It was
but
around the same.
It's relative, yeah, it's in the.
We have this document as well, it gives a breakdown.
Not a lot.
So, committee, we're gonna have to, go through this, but, unless there are further questions, I'm gonna, if everybody's in agreement on this, we'll close this section of language out and concur with the House, which was sort of a collaborative effort,
Yeah,
between both the House and the Senate. Thank you. Now, we have about 3 minutes, and then Representative Lampert's coming down.
I wasn't sure when the break would be, and I've set up a 3 o'clock meeting with the attorney general, so I'll be.
All right, well, we have Dale coming in on the PAA, so it's fine. People are trying to juggle, other things. The one thing that,
Charity part.
no, not,
Oh, I
Not
thought you said
UDG.
the attorney general.
so, one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and we've got just a couple of minutes, and, it's just to put it on everybody's radar, because you're probably getting emails or letters from your local superintendents. But what we have, here is a situation where, when the cannabis bill was passed in 2020, there was a sales tax and an excise tax. The sales tax was specifically devoted to the expansion of existing programs and the creation of new programs in underserved areas, learning programs. What has happened, and I can't reconstruct it, but originally what was done was to notwithstand the Act 60 language around the permissible uses of ed fund dollars. And so the Agency of Education has been administering some grants and so forth in the bill that we passed and trying to move up from session law and clean things up. That notwithstanding got eliminated and therefore it's created, I think in summary, the problem that we have, and that is our language is very clear that we wanted a mixed delivery system. We wanted both school operated, but also many of the programs are operated by nonprofits. We've gotten letters from the Boys and Girls, the King Street program. And but the problem is that Act 60 poison pill limiting where money from the ed fund can be spent. So without the notwithstanding language, we have created the situation that we're in. And so originally, and the plan was to create and put those revenues into a special account. Because they were specifically allocated for that purpose. They were not intended to go into underwriting the cost of our K through 12 system. So, we have a situation where, many of the LEAs are viewing it as, somehow raiding the education fund. And people have had concerns about what are the conditions that go with grants. And on the other hand, we're getting letters from these programs, and what we ended up doing last year when this was brought to our attention was to at least allow the application process to move forward and not be held up. So Agency of Education has got the grant application notice out, I think with an asterisk about contingent on the BAA. Many of these programs obviously are very anxious about, their funding and getting the money allocated out. And so there seems to be an awful lot of discussion. There seems to be some misunderstanding. I don't know whether there's been clarity to go back and look at the S-54, which was the cannabis bill that specifically dedicated these new revenues to this particular purpose. It wasn't part of supporting the normal K through 12. So the intent in the language talks about both the private and public, and the original, once this was discovered that the notwithstanding language got deleted, and we were left with the Act 60 poison pill. What do we do? And so this is going to be something that I think we're going to have to deal with on the Senate side. I think that the programs need to have the assurance of the money. Maybe a special fund is better than trying to notwithstand that very carefully crafted poison pill language, because I think many people would be concerned about. I'm sure when this was debated, it brought back the complaints about the transportation fund. Remember those whole debates around raiding the transportation fund? So I don't know how many people have gotten emails or letters or whatever, but it's squarely right here. And it's something that it does have to be dealt with timely. And so the question is, to what extent those grants, what are conditions of the grants in terms of what you have for discrimination and safeguard, and those can be obviously conditions of any grant application. I don't want us to come up with a solution right now, but I just wanted to put it out there in case you haven't gotten any communications that this is the situation as it's evolved. Representative Lanfer is here. It came up very late in their discussion of the BAA. And so the decision was made not to attempt to deal with this in the House because of time, but something that has been discussed and is something that we're going to have to somehow bring to some kind of closure. Senator Sears, you remember all this.
Worked on the bill, tried to deal with the House in the conference committees on the bills. Must say it was what I feared would happen. And once you put this into that fund, the sales tax, that was the disagreement, where would the taxes go? And I was hoping that we would use them for innovative programs to deal with the after-school problems in your community, not your school. And unfortunately, what we hear once again is innovation goes out, and I'm just dumbfounded that this is going on now. But I shouldn't have been surprised because it was predicted back then.
Well, the one.
So that's just my opinion. I know I'll get a lot of heat for it, but
Well, I do think we need to recognize that in the budget bill, of last year, Act number 78. I don't remember acts, I just know the big bill. We have after-school and summer learning programs, and Senator Pershlik was actually on the after-school program. And the House co-chair has been in contact, obviously very anxious to have this resolved. And it does say, grants shall be used to support a mixed delivery system for after-school and summer programming. It doesn't use the term even education, it's programming. Eligible recipients can be public, private, or nonprofit organizations. That is very clear in terms of the legislative intent. And that is there, but what got struck when it's a cleanup language was the notwithstanding the limitations on the funds once they went into the ed fund. So what we were attempting to do here was to create an avenue that dealt with the poison pill provision in Act 60 and fulfill the legislative intent to move the money from this new tax revenue specifically for this dedicated purpose. To me, the legislative track record intent is very clear. So that's all I've got to say. And we have Representative Lamper here now, and she can run through. But needless to say, we're getting lots of communications, and there seems to be somewhat, maybe some revisionist history at work here as well. Or people aren't aware of the poison pill provision in Act 60, or perhaps even the language when the cannabis bill was passed in 2020. So it's hard to put all that in, but that's what that's landing for some here. But maybe other committees will be having discussion, I'm not sure. So you want to come up, Representative? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm gonna bring some of my notes, but not all of them.
And we do have a copy of your highlights and we have not yet received the Dear Jane letter. But I'm sure it's coming.
The Dear Jane letter?
Yes, about what you did. The administration. does
Full
not
of
like.
praise for your work, Judy.
Oh.
And fear about.
I have no fear, I Lamper.
And we've gone through the Vermont Strong section, so that was something that we've taken off the table. Obviously, we've just talked about the after-school program and the need for moving on that. The able language that got removed, and that had to do with the estate recovery. I was talking to Stephanie Barrett of DIVA, and they actually have some other cleanup things that need to be done on estate recoveries and timing. And so their thinking is it would be good to do all of that in one place in a big bill. So that we've had a little discussion on that. So other than that, it's all yours in terms of what you.
Well, thank you, maybe I'll be delivering my Dear Jane letter in person, I don't.
Oh, no, the administration sent it to me.
Oh, to you, about everything I did wrong.
Yes.
Oh, okay, well.
I'm just telling you, I
I think I
haven't
did
got
that on
it yet.
the daily then.
Always a few things you did right.
Oh, maybe a few things. But anyway, for the record, Representative Diane Lanford, Chair of the Vermont House Appropriations Committee, and I appreciate being invited back into your room to have an opportunity to describe some of the actions that the House took in the FY 24 Budget Adjustment Act. I do not need to, nor do I want to go through every line item of every change, and I know that you have been taking testimony even before this bill has arrived over to you as we have as well. I just sort of it arrived totally brand new to the House Appropriations Committee on January 5th. It's 3 days after we were here, and we had it exactly, I think, 8 days, because one Monday was a holiday. So it went from 0 to 60 pretty darn fast. But we've taken testimony from agencies and JFO and our teams have been hearing testimony, plus all 14 of the committees have divvied up some of it, but I have to say that they've moved mostly because they're all now a little bit more seasoned chairs. We had 9 new chairs when we started last year, and about 80% of the House Appropriations Committee is brand new to the committee, so they were just learning what a BAA was. And now this getting off this year is a little stronger foot that we could move a little quicker. So information from committees of jurisdiction was coming in quick and efficiently, and we did our best to integrate it. But I want to maybe describe to you some of the actions that we took, some of them that were different than what the governor's recommend was, because I'm sure you'll hear about that. And so the first one that I would like to highlight is the fact that the cash fund that was in the capital bill, in our bill last year.
Oh, we've already talked about
We talked
that.
about that and the fact
We
that we
concur.
took, okay, great. We'll get through this.
I'm on record saying to Adam, I don't care what you're using it for, we're not changing it.
We're not changing it. The general fund gets appropriated from the appropriations committees and that's somewhere.
Otherwise, you've got a vulcanized budget. We would say,
Mhm.
well, Senator Lyons, you've got, here's your pot for help, and here's yours and yours. And so you can't really set overall priorities. So we concur with your action.
Thank you. I think one of the other things that we did that's making it a little bit more difficult, even in the FY25 budget right now, is that the administration moved the debt service, which I'm sure you've talked about, the debt service piece being moved over to as a transfer. The bonus is it removes it out of the 5%.
And you
Which-
agreed with that.
Oh, but we actually had some language in there that it would be only one time. Because, Madam Chair, I was not in the position, or did I have the desire to find $3.5 million to be able to buy that back. And they, of course, they have it in FY25 as well, so it's gonna be tough to, what I think we have in there.
Once you build it into the base,
It's
you
really hard
close
to
the door. The only thing that, and we did get a memo from the treasurer's office. Because obviously reserves are a big part of bonding and, you know, the fiscal health of the state. And 3.5 is not gonna make a critical difference. The concern is, and it's concern we've had around the table, is you open that door, it becomes very tempting. Let's underfund pensions just a little bit, and that's, well, let's just do it again. And so that's the concern, that it becomes sort of a way of,
The wedge.
and we're seeing it a lot in the transportation bill. Where,
The central garage has been zeroed out for FY
Yeah, the
24 and
surplus.
25.
surplus has been eliminated. The 25 million that we did in general fund, is set aside for the match of the IIJA. They've advanced it all to prop up spending for this year, so there's not match money that we had set aside in the
That
general
was the
fund.
last till 27.
And the other thing that has happened is you can advance projects without the state match, but you have to pay it back. So we've been advancing projects without the state match, but it's gonna have to be paid. So within the transportation arena, which isn't in the budget adjustment because they were able to make it all work within existing appropriation, but the 25 budget is really, there's gonna be a cliff in 26 and so we're trying to get a handle on that. So I realize you're not on transportation.
No, but I feel like it. That's still,
Um,
you know, it was one of my first loves.
But there is a huge intersection
Yes.
because we used general fund to prop up the IIJ match, do the garage in St. Albans, and to do a paving project. So the nexus is very strong there, and it's going to be with a capital bill in ways that have never, ever troubled us. It was sort of like, you know, you do your thing and you do your bonding, and now it's all kind of converging on the general fund, which is in such robust health. But
Compared to some of the, yes, exactly. So, all right, so I don't know what we're gonna be able to do about that, but I think the language in the BAA, especially depending on the time, I think you're planning to have this out.
I don't know,
sooner. I just wanted to be aware of the fact that we indicated in their language that it was for one time only and not. And here we are again, and I said out loud, you know, we have to be careful because we'll be the ones that we're gonna wanna do this. In the future, once we say you can't do that, and then I'm gonna be the first one who's gonna
Well, we're
want
gonna have to
to.
continue to do that, because
So we
you
might
built
wanna-
it 3.5 into the base.
So that might be a piece that you look at to adjust even our own work right now. Okay, I don't,
Well, we'll put that on our list.
so,
Could I ask you, one of the things that we're struggling with is what do we do in the BAA versus what do we do in the big bill?
Yeah.
And I'll be candid because obviously at the public hearing or with the committee work, we're seeing things that we didn't fund last year. And this, and the BAs, we've had some discussion about the purpose of the BA. And it looks like some of the funding requests, in fact, are a second bite at the apple. And if they get funded here, then that means that you've already got assurances and the rest has to stand in competition when we do the big bill. So we're gonna be looking very carefully about what is that right balance.
I think we'll have an opportunity here, and in fact, I think it's a must that we do because of the upgrade that happened at the E-board. That the House used the 29 million,
And
but
we're
that's
used
one
to.
time. And I know that 1/3 of that, 10 million of it, give or take around 10 million of it is ongoing. We didn't use it as ongoing, we used it all as one time. Didn't touch the 22 million that was on the bottom line, but evidently that was still not enough and that the governors recommend in FY 25 is also using that 29.
Mhm.
So I think we're gonna need to work, yeah, handily with our JFO to figure out where in which bill. Now that right now, that the BAA is in your hands as well as the FY 25 is in ours, of how do we negotiate around what's in there getting paid in here or what's maybe can now be in FY 25. Much like we just did the Essex courthouse, we knew that it was coming and we just put it in the BAA.
And it was just repurposed.
Repurposed, it was not a fund.
But there are others that are somewhat different than that. So I'm just saying,
Yeah, we're gonna need to,
you can't spend the same dollar twice, apparently. And in Maryland, you have to pay it back. So unfortunately. So I'm just saying, we're looking pretty carefully because you can't, the governor's budget was assuming the 29, you were assuming the 29, and how much we want to lock in now and how much we want to give some reexamination
we
as
don't
part
have
of
the
the bill.
same priorities as the governor and in some cases, and so I would see that there was working with you and the Senate on where do we want to come out of the BAA is some of the things that are different and where do we want to have that continued
And
conversation.
I think the best
at 2025.
example was last year with the organic farms. Where we had it in the BAA and we said, no, we wanna, and so it doesn't mean it isn't gonna be considered, it's just a matter of which vehicle.
So what I would see in our bill was the same sort of construct, is the 10 million for municipalities in response to the bridge to recovery. Didn't get very descriptive about exactly what that was gonna be.
No, it just says for grants.
It just could be for use for that purposes and because we found out that Thursday, we had one day, so maybe a day. So that 10 million there can be refined. I would see that getting refined either through this bill, but I think it sends a really big signal to the communities that are out there that really need that help.
So,
Just a question. So I noticed that you have a waterfall of sorts on the ARPA
Yes,
money, and there's an additional 5 million if.
Yes.
So it could be 15.
well, the total would be 15. Right now, I've got 10 million general fund,
Yeah.
which is quick. We, the House heard, particularly House Commerce, through testimony with Douglas Farnham, that I was very pleased and proud of Representative Williams, who brought forward the idea. Part of his day job is looking at this, that the ARPA in the last quarter of the Treasury guidelines said that you can use ARPA dollars now for disaster relief.
but that means since we've appropriated it all, we have to go back and redirect it.
Exactly.
So give us any more money.
It may not be, I wouldn't wanna, pardon the term, bet the farm.
Right.
That is gonna realize for the community, so a nice mix would be probably a good place.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure, if depending on the I'm sorry to be too long on that, the communities, we're getting more data if bridge to recovery for Barry is like 1.4, or is it 1.8, and does Montpelier need this, and who else is under the defined municipalities in need? That maybe that 10 comes in at 8.
We're gonna have to start.
You're gonna have to-
come in
exactly.
and understand what, well,
Right.
obviously, we wanna match everything that we possibly can. There's some loan opportunities, I understand, that are, you don't have to pay off. They're low interest and then they can be forgiven. So there may be a variety of ways of
Mhm.
leveraging money, and so we wanna have that discussion. It's not that we
No,
in
and our
any
goal
way
is to
don't
help,
understand the plight of those communities. It's just having the advantage of a little more time, how we can flesh that.
Right,
Thinking
exactly,
out.
to be a little more direct.
Center person.
On that program, where were you thinking the grants would come from? Agency administration, or which part of state government are issuing this grant?
I thought it was ACCD that was, well, it could be good now, it's not good.
I just didn't know if
No, we
the
didn't.
language
We didn't even
says.
get that far.
Okay,
No, it just said we reserved basically $10 million for a bridge to recovery for municipalities, so that is not much like we did in the organic farm, we put it there, fenced it off for it to be developed. So the amount's gonna potentially change, it could still remain 5, as a waterfall out of ARPA. As a matter of fact, we just heard.
We
that
don't
the-
use waterfall.
No,
Contingent funding.
contingent funding, sorry. And so the
Back in the waterfall days, we bought a Steinway piano. I can remember, oh, what a list of things that were on that list.
I can use that.
And we were underfunding pensions concurrently. That's the irony of it. And I was here.
you had to
So
pay
you-
pensions to the water, into the water.
Yeah, we should have.
Sounded like a good idea.
It's still on the house floor.
Where is the piano? That was Vermont Symphony, got the piano.
That's very important.
So both of those opportunities and the contingency piece, we also reached. I see the administration does a very similar in the FY 25 around some of the ARPA piece to rearrange.
Right.
I do not feel, nor did the House feel, that we have the expertise to reach into all the unobligated and have enough knowledge to say, oh, this can come out, much like Honish did, they found the $15 million piece of ARPA that really only used 3, and there we go, so. Oh, boy, there's so many things we can investigate in so little time. So anyway, we made the contingency plan because we figured that by the time December comes, there'll be things that will be falling down naturally as a part of process. So I came in and that was my second item on here was I heard you talking about after school and I agree with you 100%, Madam Chair, and I don't even need to have to repeat all of that. It was unfortunate misinformation that I'm also emailing back to people saying I'm very concerned about this misinformation because the cannabis funding, much like the purchase and use tax in vehicles, a piece of it does go to the ed fund, but the majority of it goes to the transportation fund. It was never this body's intent to not have after school funded with those dollars. I'm trying to figure out a way to make that happen, to give the agency to be able to allow them to be able to fulfill what it is we told them to do last year. And just don't, there could be policy changes that can happen in another committee. I just want to make sure that we can get the dollars out to where we said we were sending it to in a way.
Well, I
that-
did hear from the Boys and Girls Clubs,
Oh, good.
and they do operate a program in Virgins,
They do,
as you well know, in Brattleboro and.
and the Bixby Library in Virgins is like,
And
local.
so there are many, people, we're hearing from all of them. Thank you.
you're welcome,
For
and I-
keeping our emails busy.
Well, there's always something new to talk about, right?
Right.
So I did, okay, I'm just looking at my notes, the 10 million for municipalities, the 5 million emergency housing assistance. That was another piece that we added, the 3.9 that we funded from, there was 3 sections in S100 that we established the programs in last year's S100. At sections 43, 44, and 45, eviction protections, the legal counsel, pilot that was there and, I think $400,000 for the operation of certain pieces of it, but that's the 43. So it was very important that at least to go back and not do something new that was created. And so we gave that because it all has to do with housing and where we are with housing. Let me just back up to the emergency housing was another very big piece that's in this BAA and a shift of changing again. I'm sure you've heard all about it and maybe not, but,
You mean about the armor?
oh no, the armories, that's a good, in Waterbury, that's a really good thing. No, human services and working with the administration to put cap on the open motel rooms.
So we have the $75
Mhm. Yeah, and the ability to give the administration the ability to enter into a lease or a purchase. Or especially if they let us fully access the whole entity.
Where
of
did the
hotel.
75, that question, where did the 75, the concern
Oh.
has been raised particularly in higher cost areas, Chittenden County, obviously one of them, but it could be
Mm.
certainly in other areas. One, if you can't get the extent to which that's going to constrain even existing inadequate supply. And it says shall not pay more than, so it's a very,
It's a very hard line.
a very hard line.
It was $75 was the number working with the members working with the administration is what was paid before the pandemic. It was the pre-pandemic piece. So trying to be fair, I mean, there may be, the administration may negotiate or something at some point. But you're right, in here it says we shall, and $75 a night was what was paid before, and that was where the starting came from. We had an amendment on the floor to make it 50. Like,
No.
no, per household, per room. Yeah, otherwise you could have 4 people in a household, that would not fly.
Okay, Senator,
I'm glad the $75 came up, because if you use pre-pandemic, I think everything has accelerated in price since then. I mean, just inflation had us up to 7 to 9% inflation for a couple of years.
but maybe we can factor in depreciation, because one might think that the 100% utilization would have had some kind of.
Fair enough, but I guess
No,
what I
I'm
mean
just
is,
kidding.
if it was $75 pre-pandemic, it seems like it would be more, if you look at wages and prices since then, everything has drifted up pretty significantly. The other thing I wanted to ask is the language on page 186. It says, in Act 81, it says that people in the motel program, the June cohort, have the right to be housed. Here it says, Commissioner for Children and Families shall ensure that temporary emergency housing is provided. And it doesn't,
What page are you on?
this is 86.
86.
It does not separate the
Cohort.
the 3 places right now, or we just have homeless people right now in Vermont that trying to get a handle on whether or not, I mean, it was a good tracking tool that we needed for the Joint Fiscal Committee to keep that particular group through time to see how the agency was progressing with working with them with a coordinated entry and are they making movement out? So the very good. So now we have that, we have adverse weather, and then we have the other. So we have 1,560, which I believe now is 1,600 households that are in hotels. And I know you've heard this, but 60 households a day are being turned away that can't even fit. So we're not housing everybody. But we do have a baseline right now out there, 16.
And so I'm sorry, Phil, but one of the things I wanted to go back to, because maybe this is what you're getting at, adverse weather opens the door to everybody, single able body. Now, obviously, many families after the households after the June 30th came in and they have disabilities or they have children. This seems to just keep everybody there, and it reopens last year's discussion. Do we have the mother with a couple of kids end up in her car and Grady gets the motel room? And so, our concern is using that adverse weather as opposed to, maybe vulnerable populations, which would be the families and the list of people. So, I will revisit
I'm
that.
yes, I'm very sensitive to that, but I'm also extremely sensitive to some of the disruption and uncertainty and some of the, if we trying to keep the conversation calm. As far as like, we're all gonna need to revisit this hopefully in about a couple of months, where we redo all of the GA program reform again. I think I was welcome to this particular plan to get this particular group or groups through to the end of the fiscal year. Agencies working, they're working, there's money in there for the shelters. We are light years ahead of where we were a year ago when I came in to say we had a problem. But the administration now is very much understanding that there's a problem in Vermont and their willingness. I can't speak for them. I don't think anybody wants to be the one, wants to unhouse people. We also need to be taking into account all of, like you said, there are people who are over 60, there are people with disabilities, there are families. We have 600 and something children is a part of that, that whole cohort that we're,
And that's not the group we're talking about.
no.
And so I guess it's just, do we condition, we get, because Senator Ruth has raised this point, obviously they're bringing on more beds, but there's still a gap between even the June cohort plus any of the other, even if we say vulnerable, populations. So,
And so just two quick things. One is I do have concern that it seems like the June cohort here and the adverse weather cohort are being sort of moved back into an aggregate. And the thing about the Act 81 and the most vulnerable is that we had data and we had a focus on those most vulnerable folks. They were getting placed at a very slow rate, getting placed. I worry that this will kind of undo that focus on the most vulnerable, and it'll just become one, large group again. And then my other concern is, I'm wondering, so given that it's not just the Act 81 cohort, but it's also the adverse weather folks being provided through June 30th. Did you have testimony that 5 million would cover that?
Well, all right, so they were crunching numbers, both the House Human Services and with the administration to figure out just exactly if at $75, how much would be saved and how long would that last? So they came up with they had 1,560 at $75 a night, how long the savings would allow them the runway.
Right.
And they came in and said 2.5.
Per month.
No, 2.5 in addition to what was in the VAA already. The governor had 8 million.
Yeah.
And 4 million.
But that was only to go until April.
So they would need another 2.5, they figured, and I said, don't tell any other committee chairs that it's like, I don't say, I don't think it's enough. But because this is such a back of the envelope sketch thing with people who are whether they're vulnerable or that we had the bandwidth to maybe go with another 2.5. So I took their 2.5 and I made it 5. So that they have potentially what they need. Again, this number can get refined through process.
Well, I applaud the fact that you doubled what is clearly an insufficient number, 2.5, to my way of thinking. I also don't believe the idea, if it's based on a calculation of $75 a night, and I understand that's capped here, but some of these folks are gonna drop out of the program because they'll say they can't make that number work. Then you're dealing back to the two cohorts being lumped together with suddenly fewer rooms. So I honestly.
That is a risk.
Yeah, I think there's a risk there. I also believe that $5 million is not gonna carry that expanded cohort through to June 1st. But hearing it described as a back of the envelope calculation from the administration doesn't do a lot to restore my confidence in they've They lost my confidence, frankly, in a year ago, they told us they had this completely under control. And they had a plan and teams on the ground that were gonna take care of all these folks. Here it is, more than a year later, and we're still talking about a gap, maybe. Chris Winters came in and testified that there could be a gap of 500 or 600 individuals in the June cohort, let alone in the larger adverse weather group. So, I'm not saying we should double your 5 million, but 5 million seems, I'd be surprised if that's all it costs.
No, it's the 8 that's in there plus the 5.
Right, but between April 1st and June 1st.
And then it still raises,
We haven't extended it.
even
No.
last year, we didn't extend, I mean, that whole adverse weather group. And I think what people are really saying is if we're constraining the supply, which we're running the risk of doing, plus we have so much and what happens with, if you don't have enough capacity, who is getting their shelter and who's not, and prioritizing it. And every dollar we spend on a motel room is a dollar we don't have for permanent housing or for some kind of, temporary housing. So it's a very difficult conversation to have. We wish we were closer, but we're in a lot better place than we were, and the answer is just shut the program down and somehow everybody goes away.
And there's some people that had that thought that, why don't you shut it down? And I said, then you can shut it down. It was shut down a long time ago. We've been reinventing it every couple of months to get to another place with it. And it's not going to end the situation. We have thousands of Vermonters in a very, very bad spot.
How come we didn't have thousands before the pandemic? I mean,
Well, I can only imagine that we had many. We had many before, and I can remember the conversations in appropriations before when the GA program was thought outrageous when we had $3 million worth of hotel rooms at any given time was thought to
We
be.
should have concurred with you years ago when the House wanted to get rid of the whole motel program.
well,
That's the irony of this discussion. Yes.
Well,
You remember.
Yes, I totally remember, they
run
wanted.
into an entitlement, and
well,
as long as you get started down that road, it's still gonna be an entitlement, and
Well, entitlement might be too strong a word for it, but I would say, if you live in Burlington, if you live in Brattleboro or Rutland or other places where a lot of these folks are, it's not as though when you exit them from the motel program, they vanish into a nice home, and you don't see them again. They are now living in tents, in Battery Park and other places around the city. And so, I'm just trying to make sure that we're not repeating the
Mhm.
overly optimistic view that we had in the last BAA.
Well,
Did we have that in the last BA?
no, we
Well,
we
we
put
did.
in language, we put in additional, we extended eligibility, and this was before Act 81.
It was before.
So, yeah, Senator,
No, it's a bit frustrating, I have to say, that we have really asked and looked for the planning process to happen. We're finally getting to a stage
Mhm.
where we realize that the money that we'd expended during the pandemic for hotels was way over the top. That should have happened a lot earlier, honestly. This has been a very frustrating experience, having gone through literally 2 years of negotiations and trying to have the administration pull through. The issue around human resources has not really adequately been addressed, administratively at all. And a lot of it's being left to our local communities and our regional support services, which is okay, but without, full support at the state level, it's, again, very frustrating.
It is very frustrating.
So
It's been a
I'm
while.
agreeing with pro tem.
well, I'm gonna
I'm
move
good.
on because.
Okay, we're gonna try to stay on the
I'm
positive
solid.
side, that at least we're all on the same page of recognizing that it's a problem and it's a crisis. Okay, there's a plus, and now we can start to really deal. All right, so there was that, we put some one-time money in for food banks and Meals on Wheels. You heard about that from both the public hearing and for, for food. It's not unthinkable. There was one support for the support of a refugee support services, particularly in the South, and one at Howard that I have to tell you, to be honest, I wasn't so.
We're gonna
Look
revisit
more on
those,
that.
whether that needs to go into the big
Big
bill.
It wasn't until we heard the economists talking about where the growth in Vermont is coming from, and that is foreign born. So it's like, all right, so that seemed to make sense to support the people that are here, as where the growth is in Vermont is in foreign born. We put in a straight up general fund of 4.5 to each of the Vermont Housing Conservation Board and to the VHFA, thinking the contingency funding may not truly develop, but at least there's something there that's straight up. There's a 500,000 to adult ed, which is a little bit of a remnant from last year into here. The 253,000 for the organic farmers was to finish off a few farms that qualified that didn't, so that would complete that process. We took back the $3 million from the ERP, the business transformation funding. Not the purpose, because there's $28 million in the project that they could use. You'll see language in there that allows $3 million of that pot of money to be used in the same way, and at some point down the line, at the end of that 28 million, we'll need to
We took testimony on that, sort of reminiscent of what's happening on the TV. We're gonna spend the money, but we know that
it's gonna be due again,
it's gonna,
potentially. I think what really was,
because the amount of money that's in the account for that project is sufficient to cover it to begin with. So it just adds to.
adds to the further down the line. Yeah, and totally understand. Through testimony and through an opportunity with Dale on the emergency finance relief, the administration had $17 million in there. Human Services had testimony as to that there was $10 million out, that there was two. They really narrowed down what they needed, and they really had about 11 million. So 14 million is still sufficient at this point. I don't know if the administration might not feel that way, but we could bring back 3 million from that piece, but that's a gross dollar, so it ended up being just $1 million. And on the other side, some other things that I'll finish with, just a couple of the concerns that I had was on the $50 million in reversions. That there was just 2 reversions that the House did not agree with. That was the child care workers readiness grant. The administration had $3.8 million reverting back, and we were able to, with general funds, then purchase back $1 million. So you'll see in our bill, it's 2.8 at that point. And in the Justice Reinvestment 2, there was a $1.3 million reversion upon discovery of people talking to their budgets. I think it's about 600,000 of it that was for transitional housing, that they didn't realize that they could ask to have it pulled back over again. So we were able to restore but 500,000 of that. That's the only 2 pieces of the reversions that we did not agree with the administration on, but the overall 50 million is a big deal. You'll see
But in the scheme of a $8 billion budget, probably it's not.
this is true. However, when and this is just my pet peeve a little bit. I think they said they had it's either 200 million of carry forward that was approved. We don't see that. We don't see what was approved, and I would like to be able to see that of, like, I don't know if it's 150 that was approved out of 200, 50 was reverted, or was it 250 and there was 200 that was approved? I don't know. We've asked the administration if they could provide, because I want to see if there's a trend in there as to what's not getting moving. All right, so you'll see in their language around in the carry forward providing us with that list. I'm done.
One question that I had, and perhaps your committee didn't see it or not, there's language that said, any facility conversion, this is for a shelter, shall comply with the Office of Economic Opportunity Shelter Standards. And we were wondering, were those still
Where did that come from?
Yeah.
There's some, well, I'm thinking, boy, and I could be wrong, so let's just.
so would that be, we could ask
Standard, yes, standard language of what they, for, health and safety, fire code. I think in some of the cases, if you.
normally, yeah, that kind of thing usually would come out of, like fire marshal and stuff. So that's why I was wondering, but, I guess we need to find out more. What are their standards and how are they developed for shelter?
Remember at Elkhart that the rules they actually brought in the summer, because it's not necessarily in contract to actually pay. I think there was a rule change that the administration wanted that basically said, you can have, the hotel room would at least have to be able to pass the health inspection.
Oh, no, this is,
And
this is,
fire, yeah.
but this is, shelter standards for, community housing or, well, it says sales agreement with a hotel motel.
Yeah.
And it doesn't say it says Office of Opportunity, shelter standards, like motel and hotel are usually governed by the health department. So I was just, I was just kind of, wondering where that standard and, was that the right place to
I
compliance?
sorry, I'm not knowledgeable about where that exactly, I think
Well-
it came from working with human services and the administration on. But I can find that out for you.
Well, it does up above, does have, but this is all around the shelter community housing agency may enter into a full agreement with a hotel motel and they shall comply, but up above, it's, reference to Department of Health, Public Safety, and it was sort of like, well, geez, I didn't know OEO has issued housing standards for shelters.
Part of the 2.5 million, I think, in human services testimony was about $300,000 to continue a security contract as well.
I wouldn't be surprised about that, they have to pay for that sheriff, but this has to do with I think the physical condition of the shelter and the standards. Okay.
Well, the House vote on this was, you probably know, was 112 to 24 with 14 people. I must have nodded off.
Somebody committee votes again.
Oh, no, the committee vote was, straw vote was unanimous, and then over the weekend, miraculously, it became an 8-3, 8-4. Well, everybody was happy on Friday,
Along party lines.
yes,
I guess phone calls must have been made.
that would be my interpretation.
I do have a question on page 51. It does have reference to after school money, but
Oh,
would that be changed?
no, that we left in. I can't remember what we ended up taking it out, but there was one line that the administration in the process of changing over to the special fund.
Yeah.
Was to strike the part where after school, the cannabis fund would get trued up at budget adjustment. That I want it to be, so that there's that cycle where, if you recall last year in after school, there was a prediction that there'd be $6 million. Didn't wanna put out grants because what if it comes in at 5.5?
Okay.
So that we went with the $4 million is pretty sure, and then have it trued up at budget adjustment, which you'll see in there is about a 2.6 for the after school true up. Cause what was actually did come in for the time period. So I would like to make sure that I know they say, well, they'll just do it, they'll true it up. I'd like to,
You don't wanna overspend.
No, I don't wanna overspend, plus I wanna make sure we know what's available for that. It's kind of brand new unless you see it there, and because it was a very direct.
That's the
purposeful
advantage of
line.
the special fund.
But
Exactly, the special fund, you could see it.
you took out the language that created the special fund, huh?
I did in order to hopefully get through some of the controversy that
That's why
people
we
were
have it.
having.
Right,
That-
but you can do this without a special.
We can't do it,
This-
We
this-
true it up, we can.
But don't you need a special fund?
No, because it was, we
The
just,
after school and summer learning fund isn't fund, it's a staff.
we thought that's where we were going,
Right.
but then people got very reactive thinking we were taking something away from the ed fund.
Right.
And it wasn't really,
But Andy's point is just this presumes that we're gonna create.
Right.
well, that was a part of the original language.
Right.
And so the administration was gonna take it out and
We
I,
either have to add the special fund or change this language one of the two.
or it was a part of it now anyway, because even, all right, when taking it all out, if you left it and you made no changes to any of this, didn't do a special fund or anything, you still want to make sure.
We need to go back and check, but the notwithstanding provision, which
Right.
allowed the ed fund to make these payments with this money, was only pulled out in this year's budget. So maybe you're truing up.
I have a question
June
about that.
30th.
Like when we put the money to the after school,
Mhm.
did we put it in the ed fund or did we just give it to the agency?
Yeah, we put it in the ed
It
fund
went into the ed fund in the end.
with
But-
needs of management, and then it.
But.
So you can give it to the agency without putting it in the ed fund, no? Because that's the way it read when I read it. But I don't know the math.
Hey,
I just stopped to say.
let me get another band.
I know that anyway.
I have a rubber band. I can use it. Retirement.
You'd have to, you still would have to appropriate it outside the education fund, and our problem is the sales tax right now.
No, I'm talking about in the past what we did. It seems like we didn't have it in the education.
We had just 1 year, and I'm thinking, what? Was this the first year at all?
This is the first
Yeah.
year.
The money we had last year was like either federal funds or we used general funds.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what they had for funding, but they were administered by the agency.
Yeah.
They were not out to the local LEAs.
Right, no, the agency granted that money. For both
A lot of
private
it,
and public.
yeah, and a lot of it started with the bill that we passed, where we had the Department of Mental Health working together with AOE with ESSER funding, and then having the grants go out to
Oh, yeah.
local groups and organizations.
Well, we'll look
The
at
grants,
what we're
sorry.
showing up here.
Yeah,
Emily and Amy,
Yeah.
we can check on that. That'll run through.
So I do have a question about, the money that was put in by the administration, for nursing homes. They put in about 17.5 million. The advocates, tell me that because of, traveling nurses and all of that, that it's something close to 17 might be, and the House put in 14. And
Yeah, that's what you said.
and I'm trying to figure out how did you come up with the
Yeah,
figure?
and we have Dale coming in at 3.
So, from testimony from House Human Services, when they took the testimony, looking at that 17, they have the data to say that 10 of it was already approved, and that they had 2 that were pending, and 1 that was not still out there, so that they felt that they were about exposed at about 11 million at that point, and so putting 14 seemed like a comfortable place, but I'm not so sure if that agreement,
Well,
everyone else.
we'll find out whether Dale agrees with that calculus, when they come in at 3. And that adds, how much money did you scoop from that? 3 million?
3 gross, it was 1.0 something was the general fund part of it.
But I'm assuming you
Yeah, and I
used
see
it other places, right?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
and all of that is hopefully accounted for. We did have at the very end of $74,000 and something left that we just left alone.
You didn't spend it all.
We did not spend it all. Figured that's a math piece that JFO or somebody will find something over the weekend that it will be needed for.
Well, considering some of the things we've seen, like 3-cent corrections and
Yes.
stuff, I guess probably 74,000, not bad. Other questions of the chair? No. Thank you.
a lot of good work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I look forward to partnering and finishing this off. Have a good afternoon.
Oh. Okay, we have a break until 3. So I'm going to go offline at this point, and we'll reconvene at 3 and we'll